Good morning, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'll be reviewing for you
Okay. So I was told that I have to sing. I'm a little bit camera shy, so here goes. Donkey Kong Bonanza for the Switch 2!
As seems to be the case with most Nintendo franchises, I have a pretty hit or miss history with Donkey Kong. I love Returns and Tropical Freeze, and I also really used to love Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, and even parts of Donkey Kong 64 I really like. But I didn't play too much of the original trilogy. I beat the original Donkey Kong Country when it came to the SNES Classic Edition, but then I never played 2 and 3 because SNES games just have really weird controls that make it hard for me to even just play the game, and they seem to be a bit on the unfair side at times. But when this came out, I was really excited because one, it's the first 3D Donkey Kong game in 25 years, and two, the idea is that you have these huge explorable levels where you can kind of complete things out of order, and you can destroy almost everything in the environment. Heck, some players have even found ways to destroy most of the levels themselves. It's pretty darn insane how much the Switch 2 can actually handle, and seeing as this was originally going to be a Switch 1 game, I am really glad that the extra horsepower allows for the game to never really freak out with all of this destruction. Really, the only way you can actually reset the destruction of the level is if you exit the level and come back. Now, if the game were only about destroying things, I can imagine that would be pretty boring, and you'd probably rather just play Blast Corps on the Nintendo 64. But thankfully, Donkey Kong Bonanza realizes that it is also a 3D platformer, and so people are going to want to do 3D platforming. So, the game does a good job of mixing things up with a variety of moves that Donkey Kong can use both by himself and also with the various terrain pieces. Starting off with what you can do with the terrain, you can rip off most chunks of the level and you can use them to surf on the ground, or swing them like a sword, or even throw it like a projectile. And as the game goes along, the terrain you get differs, so that it keeps coming up with more and more clever ideas. I describe this game as a constant upward trajectory. It just keeps getting better and more clever, to the point where I would say these are some of the most clever ideas I've seen in a Nintendo game in a long time. I know people are going to compare this to Super Mario Odyssey, and you should compare it to Super Mario Odyssey because it was made by the same developers, and boy can you tell. Everything from the way that the camera only scrolls like an inch if you try to rotate it when you're talking to people, to the fact that everyone speaks gibberish except for Pauline, which we'll get to. And there's even like different currencies that you can use to buy outfits with the same left to right menu that Super Mario Odyssey used. But where a lot of people are probably going to say, oh, it is an Odyssey, so therefore it's the inferior game, I'm personally in the camp that I feel like this is more of an evolution of Super Mario Odyssey. Don't get me wrong, there's a few things that game does better, but overall I think this is the more refined experience. Like, for example, in Super Mario Odyssey, coins were actually your currency, but you also had purple coins that you could use to buy region-specific outfits. And coins you could use to buy stuff like more moons. Now, most of the stuff you bought with coins was, for the most part, relatively useless. Like, a lot of the stuff you bought with the purple coins was just decorations for the Odyssey. But in Donkey Kong Bonanza, you can actually buy really helpful items that could make or break the level. You can get red balloons, which can prevent you from falling off cliffs, similar to what the green balloons did in the later remakes of Donkey Kong Country Returns. There's apple juice, which automatically refills your health if you run out, and melon juice, which allows you to transform into an animal even if your transformation gauge isn't full. So gold and currency actually has a use in this game, And when you die, you lose some of that currency, and you feel like you're losing valuable resources. Whereas in Super Mario Odyssey, you felt like the coins being lost wasn't too much of a punishment. You just have to wait longer to get stuff like moons and extra costumes. So it felt like a slight penalty, but not too much. Whereas in this game, it can really add up near the end with those tough battles. Getting back to Donkey Kong's moveset, he's actually quite agile, even if he's not using the terrain. He can roll, and he can even roll again after you jump. He can climb up walls, most walls. There are some that are slippery. And unlike Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, there is no stamina gauge. So Donkey Kong can just keep on climbing as much as he wants, and he climbs pretty fast. He can even climb up walls with his feet if he's carrying something, which I think is just absolutely brilliant. Is it immersive? No, but it does make the game a lot more fun and a lot snappier. And overall, I think the thrill of movement is probably one of the most important things that you can nail in a 3D platformer, and this game does feel very fun to move around in and chain up different rolls and jumps and when you surf on terrain, and it overall leads to a very good feeling experience. But what about the destruction? How does that handle? Now, a couple of people have pointed out that destroying the levels causes a few frame drops. For me, I didn't notice too much that simply destroying the level. It was mainly if I was destroying gold statues that would give me more money, or if I was in a lot of combat. But actually, smashing through the levels was for the most part pretty satisfying. The camera did a good job of phasing through walls when it needed to, and I know in most games that would be considered a downgrade, but in this game it's good to be able to see what's around you when you're so deep under the level, so that you can get an idea of where you can smash and where you can't. It can sometimes give you little indicators of maybe where some gold is, or maybe where some unique fossils are, which is another unique form of currency. One thing that I found was a slight disappointment is that a lot of the collectibles that you find don't seem like they have too much rhyme or reason as to where they're placed. You kind of just have to dig at random. And the game seems to realize this because some of the items you can buy in the shop or find in treasure chests are maps. And maps will point out where a collectible is on the map. But the problem with this system is that you can only carry one map at a time. So it can be a bit of a tedious process, and I abandoned this after the first level. But it is nice that there's an alternate way of searching for the collectibles besides using that parrot in Super Mario Odyssey that would give you a vague name of the moon and leave you to figure it out. Now, one collectible I haven't talked about too much are the bananas. And the game seems to realize that this is an obvious nod to Donkey Kong 64 because when you get one it says, "Oh, banana!" in a very similar way to how Grant Kirkhope would say, "Oh, banana!" in Donkey Kong 64. And since you have to smash the bananas, since they have a glass covering over them, after Donkey Kong does a celebratory pose, he will rapidly grab all of the chunks of banana and eat them in a similar way to when you beat a level in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. You'd have to eat all the bananas really quickly. Generally speaking, the game is quite the love letter to Donkey Kong, but let's not get too distracted. What the bananas do are they are your upgrade items. So you have a skill tree, and the more powerful the skill, the more bananas you need to unlock them. Some of these can unlock entirely new moves, such as the ability to do a spin jump. And these upgrades can really make or break the game. Like, some of them give you more health, let you carry more recovery items, because for some reason you can only carry one container of apple juice and one container of melon juice. But I am very thankful that the bananas are completely optional. Like in Donkey Kong 64, you'd have to have a certain amount of bananas to proceed to the next level. And thankfully, you really aren't locked behind items too much. When you get too near the end of most of the levels, you'll meet the elder of that particular layer, because most of this game is underground, so the kingdoms of Mario Odyssey are now called layers. And they'll ask you to find pieces of an ancient record, and that record will allow you to transform into different animals. But thankfully, there's at the most only ever 4 pieces, sometimes less than that. And the NPCs nearby will have icons above their heads that have a piece of a record on it, and they will literally point you exactly where you need to go. And you have the option to whistle to help you find your way to the objective, and the whistling will also help point you in the way of the record. So it's usually very rarely obtuse and doesn't take too long, and includes some really cool platforming challenges. Now let's get on to the transformations, since I alluded to those. The name Bananza in the title is not only a play on words of the fact that Donkey Kong likes bananas, but he can also transform by beating his chest for a really long time, and you can shorten that time if you upgrade your skill tree. And these transformations allow Donkey Kong to do various moves that he wouldn't be able to otherwise. The first transformation that you get is just him turning into a much bigger monkey and being able to punch through terrain that is either harder to punch in his normal form, or he simply can't, like concrete, for example. And later on you get more and more abilities, and you can quickly switch between them at will. In order to make sure that your transformation gauge is full, you have to keep collecting gold, which is the currency in this game, so even more of a reason to hold on to your currency. And even though you only have so much time that you can be in each animal form, if you've collected enough gold to refill your meter, you can just transform right back right away, and some levels will even have these melons that you can punch through to refill your gauge quickly. Each of these transformations has a unique song, but the song's not just playing in the background because it can. Donkey Kong has a companion in this game that is none other than a 13-year-old Pauline, who is really good at singing, and the power of her vocals allows these transformations to be possible. She can also sing if there's tape in front of a switch that Donkey Kong needs to press. She can help guide him to the next objective if he's not sure where to go. And I found this to be a pretty hit or miss system, because Jenny Kidd, the actress that they cast for young Pauline, is a really good singer. In fact, she's more known for her singing than her acting. But my problem is that she doesn't have enough English songs that she sings. All of the transformation songs are sung in another language, and I wasn't a big fan of that because it seemed like a juxtaposition from her natural speaking voice. But when she does finally sing in English, it is absolutely jaw-dropping, and I actually got goosebumps from her later performances, and that's saying a lot coming from someone who typically does not like hearing the female range because it tends to hurt my ears a bit. Speaking of Pauline, one of the areas of the game where you get the most character development for her, if you can call it that, this isn't a very story-driven game, is when you find getaways. You'll find these rock characters that are shaped like houses at multiple points throughout each layer. And if you pay an increasingly high amount of gold, you can build a getaway. Unfortunately, these getaways all look the same no matter what layer you're in, which does make it a bit repetitive, but you can sleep in the bed to refill your hearts and get additional hearts. The more getaways you build on each layer, the more additional hearts you'll receive. You can find a closet, which allows Donkey Kong and Pauline to change outfits, which not only are cool for aesthetics, but they can also provide perks. And there's a music player where you can listen to the game's soundtrack, which, you know me, I'm always happy to have an in-game soundtrack player. It does feel a bit muffled compared to what you would hear in the regular levels, but it is still nice to have the option to hear them, but you don't just get them right away. You have to find discs throughout the levels. And this, once again, like all the other collectibles, seems like it comes completely out of nowhere. But thankfully, when I was looking through the hints, this hint didn't appear until very late in the game, unfortunately, but it said that the records are located with certain enemies. So if I'm ever the type that goes back to this game to try to get all the records, I imagine I'll just engage in combat a lot more. When Donkey Kong and Pauline are taking a nap on the bed, Pauline will interrupt Donkey Kong's sleep and share her observations about the level, as well as occasionally giving a bit of tidbits about her past. And seeing as, again, this game's narrative is almost non-existent, it is nice to get these little vignettes, even if sometimes the line delivery is a little bit off. And speaking of which, I find it really bizarre that Pauline is the only character in this game that speaks in full English, but at least all of her lines are fully voice acted, so I am glad that we are not in the era where you would just have characters as thought bubbles in Donkey Kong 64. As if the core single-player experience wasn't enough, there's a side mode called DK Artist, where you can use mouse mode to sculpt pretty much whatever you want. And I've seen some relatively impressive stuff. Like, one person was able to draw Mario's face in the style of how it appeared on the title screen of Super Mario 64, and another person made Banjo's face. Nintendo Life has an article all about that where you can see what I'm talking about. And I did not test this mode because my artistic skills are about on par with that of a toddler, and even that is generous. The game also has a co-op mode where one person can play as Pauline and use the mouse mode to blast vocals at the level. There's even the option for player 2 to play on a Switch 1, which I am really surprised how they pulled that off. Although I imagine it's not impossible considering that this game was originally in development for the Switch 1. There is amiibo support, and there's even a special Donkey Kong and Pauline amiibo, but I did not test this. I completely forgot to test what amiibos do to begin with, because I just wasn't thinking. I was just having so much fun with this game that I didn't stop to think, oh, what could amiibo do? If you're a diehard fan of most of the Donkey Kong games, you are probably going to love this, as there's lots of loving tributes to pretty much every major Donkey Kong game out there, and even some nice callbacks to Super Mario Odyssey, because Mario was the main character of the original Donkey Kong. So I think you'll have a lot of fun searching for the throwbacks. Heck, you can even play through some levels from the original trilogy, but with the new engine, if you know where to find them. I never found them during my playthrough, but I also tried to avoid most challenge doors, so maybe that's on me, but I do think that's super cool that that is an option. In my excitement, I almost forgot to talk about the combat. At first, it's kind of boring, as a lot of the enemies can be defeated by just punching or throwing chunks at them. But gradually, the game introduces more and more clever bosses, and a lot of them make great use of the variable destruction patterns that you can do. And it leads to some of the most clever boss battles I have seen in a 3D platformer in a long time. Heck, I might even say these are some of the most clever boss battles ever. They actually make Super Mario Odyssey look like kind of a joke in comparison. I know a lot of people are going to prefer the capture mechanic, and while it's true that that does a good job of helping you get through the environment in clever ways, I personally feel like this game does a better job of creating an upward trajectory of creativity. Like, sure, the first level starts out okay, and then the next one is, oh, okay, that's pretty good. And then the next one's like, oh, wow, this is getting good. To the point where by the end of the game, I was absolutely mind blown. And I will warn you right now, the game's villains may look cartoony, but as the game progresses, they know how to put up quite the fight. The final battle in particular was quite challenging. Thankfully, the game does have an assist mode if you're having too much trouble, but I was at the point where I was losing so much gold from retrying that by the time I reached the point where I would have gone broke if I died one more time, I said, this is it. If I lose this one, I'm either going to have to grind or go on easy mode, so I will go out with one last chance. And that was finally the chance that I beat the final boss. And it was an absolutely exhilarating end sequence. Probably one of the best that I've seen since maybe Twilight Princess, with that game's insane final act. Overall, I have very positive feelings toward Donkey Kong Bananza. Sure, sometimes it has slowdown, but it's not really too bad. It's mostly just during combat. And I didn't destroy the levels as much as most people did, so maybe I just focused too much on getting to the next stage. But I liked the fact that that game gives you so much more freedom. Like in Super Mario Odyssey, for example, you would have to collect enough moons to proceed to the next kingdom, and that was this game's way of encouraging you to explore the levels. But Donkey Kong Bonanza doesn't really do that as much. Sure, it has the ancient record pieces, but at the most there's only 4 per level, so it doesn't take too long, and it gets you to some really good platforming challenges, and really the only thing stopping you from going to the next layer is just the next objective in the, quote, story, if you can call it that. So the game caters to players that maybe might want to beat the game in more of a hurry, but then it has a nice lengthy post game that does require you to search for stuff. So if you're the type that wants to pick up absolutely everything and explore the levels to your fullest, you can do that after you beat the game. Now this game costs $70, and I personally don't think that's worth it for me because I rented this game from GameFly, and I feel like that was a good deal for me. I'm probably going to send it back in once I capture footage for this review and be happy about it. But I think Nintendo's justification for why this was $70 was just the insane amount of destruction you can do without breaking the game. And also, sometimes this game has some pretty gorgeous visuals, especially when there's water and sand. Like, even in handheld mode, where I can only play in 1080p, there were some really detailed sand particles and water effects, and you can see every hair on Donkey Kong's fur, and all the individual blades of grass, and so many special effects happening when you're destroying things. It is really quite astonishing. Sometimes the hit detection can be a bit wonky if there's lava or poison, especially if you're destroying the environment in such a way that it spills out in an unnatural formation. Sometimes there's a bit of slowdown, but overall the game feels like a typical Nintendo game, full of polish and charm and lots of cool references, really good music, and an absolutely spectacular endgame. If you're willing to spend the $70, this is a pretty meaty campaign, so you are getting a lot of content, and the post-game is pretty huge, and there's plenty of optional stuff to go for. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing to find where the collectibles are, but I think if you're willing to invest in the maps, I think that'll make the collection process a lot easier. So make up your own mind. Do you think $70 is worth it? Personally, I think that this game maybe doesn't feel quite as ambitious as something like Tears of the Kingdom, where that had a seamless transition between layers, and it also doesn't seem like it has as grand of a feeling. But at the same time, the 4K really does make this game so gorgeous. So I really don't have a good answer, but if you're like me, I think a rental is probably the good way to go, unless if you really want the post-game. So with that, thank you very much for watching, my friends. I would love it if you could leave me a comment describing your thoughts and asking any questions so that we can start a conversation. And I hope that you'll have a wonderful day, and until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!